time for another installment, and of course I'm wearing the cowboy hat, the western hat, so obviously we're going to talk about a western of some sort today, but not just any western. A western that sort of spawned a lot of things that wound up in the grindhouse. A film from 1960 called The Magnificent Seven. Of course, anybody who knows anything about film would know that this was an adaptation of Kurosawa's The Seven Samurai. The film starred Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson, James Coburn, Brad Dexter, Robert Vaughn, and Horst Buchholz. Now, thing was that Yul Brynner was the one who actually started the project, got it going, and he was also the guy who lobbied for Steve McQueen to be in the film, much to his regret, because it wound up that him and McQueen really didn't get along, and McQueen kept trying to upstage Brynner in every scene they shared. Unfortunately, that upstaging each other spread to the rest of the cast, and director John Sturges was quick to admit that he lost control of the film. But the thing was, and if you watch the film, and everybody knows what it is, it's basically, you know, 7 gunfighters are recruited to help a Mexican village from bandits led by Calvera Eli Wallach, in the role that would basically, you know, segue into him being Tuco in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But anyway, if you watch the opening scenes of The Magnificent Seven, you'll see that McQueen and Brynner are on a stage going to take somebody to the cemetery. You also notice that McQueen does something with a shotgun shell, starts fooling with his hat and doing a bunch of stuff. Basically, what he is doing is trying to draw the attention off Brynner and onto him. Brynner stopped the shot and said, you know, you keep doing that, you're going to completely upstage and nobody will look at you in the damn film again. And McQueen goes, how are you going to do that? He goes, I'll just take off my hat. So that sort of stopped that a little bit. But unfortunately, the animosity was there. All the characters played went on to become superstars. Of course, you know, everybody knows where Bronson went, you know, Coburn, Robert Vaughn. Brad Dexter became a producer. He gave up acting and became a major producer. And Horst Buchholz basically went back to Germany. It was a weird type thing. Why? I don't know why they cast him in the role of a Mexican, because he was German. But that was also a bone of contention between him and McQueen, because McQueen thought that he should be the romantic lead and basically made Buchholz's life miserable because he wasn't the romantic lead. And in one of the last interviews Buchholz gave, he really snarled when McQueen's name was brought up because he really didn't like the guy. Little sideway here. Eli Wallach, if you notice in the film that he always had to look down before he stuck his gun in his holster, it was because he couldn't master doing that without looking down. He didn't want to be embarrassed by like missing the holster if he didn't look. The gang that was basically his gang were some real people that were pretty bad, and they adopted him as one of them. And one of the baddest fucking people in Mexican film history was Emilio El Indigo Fernandez, who actually had fought with Pancho Villa during the war. And he was assigned to Eli, you know, to segue him into, you know, the character. So basically he took him out and bought a sombrero, which was way too big, and they had to cut it down. But there was a lot of things going on with that film. The producers were sort of chairlocked by the Mexican government because a prior film called Veracruz, which strangely enough also starred Charles Bronson in a small role, pissed off the Mexican government, and they had the Mexican censors on set. And one of the things they insisted on was that the peons could not be dirty. Now, here you have basically farmers dressed in white that are working in the fields and helping dig ditches, and they're not dirty, but the 7 are dirty. The other thing was that they didn't like the fact that the Mexicans would have to hire gunmen, like in the original Seven Samurai, where they had to hire gunmen. So they had to change the whole thing around, where they basically went into town to buy guns and are told that it might be cheaper to hire guys who can actually use the guns. So, oddly, the Magnificent Seven tanked in the United States, but was a huge hit overseas, which would lead to a sequel. Now, I made notes this time on a paper bag. A sequel in 1966 called Return of the Seven. Now, Yul Brynner was once again back as the leader, Chris Adams, and supposedly Steve McQueen wanted to come back as Vin. But Brynner did not want McQueen back. He said he would refuse to do the film if McQueen was brought back. So basically what happened was they hired Robert Fuller to play the part of Vin. Now Fuller said in an interview, he goes, I knew that Yul had problems with Steve. And he goes, I had never worked with Yul before. And I was brought in, on set, and he goes, basically what happened was that the Mirish Corporation didn't want to go through the fucking bullshit that they went through down in Mexico. So they relocated the shooting to Spain. And I don't know if this was a sort of FU to the Mexican government or whatever, but they brought Emilio Fernandez and Rodolfo Acosta, two of the premier Mexican actors, over to be the bad guys. So Fuller said, he arrived in Spain, he hadn't met McQueen, and they had asked, would you like to meet, Mr. Brynner? So he goes, I'm brought in, and Brynner's getting made up, and he's sitting in front of a bunch of mirrors and doesn't even turn around. And they said, this is Robert Fuller, he'll be playing the part of Vin. And Fuller said, for like 30 seconds, he said nothing, and then he said, do you play cards? And Fuller goes, well, yeah, I love to play cards. Then there was more dead silence, and he goes, do you drink? And he goes, well, shit, yeah, I love to drink. Next thing, Brynner's out of the chair hugging him. They pull out a bottle. They do half the bottle before they go on set and shoot the movie. Now, the first movie, was, Mexican bandits plundering a village. This one had the Emilio Fernandez character taking villagers as slavers to work in this mine. Well, of course, one of the people he takes is Chico from the original movie. Now, Chico was played by, this time, Julian Mateos. The rest of the seven were, as I said, Robert Fuller, Julian Mateos as Chico, Warren Oates, Claude Atkins, Jordan Christopher, and a Portuguese actor named Virgilio Texeira. I'm probably saying that wrong, but he was a big-time Portuguese actor that was known on the continent, and it made sense to cast him. A lot of people shit on this one as being inferior to the first one, but a sequel's never going to top the original. We all know that. So, there was the complete shootout, and the only guys that walked away from it this time were Chris, Vin, Warren Oates' character, and Chico. The rest were all killed in the fighting. So that was the second one. Now, the point in this was The Magnificent Seven was one of the first ensemble cast movies, which, here you're introduced to a handful of characters, you get to know them, you get to know all about them, and you genuinely feel sorry when they get killed at the end of the film. So that's what The Magnificent Seven brought to the grindhouses, because how many, grindhouse films use the same template of, a group of people put together, you learn about them, they're facing impossible odds and they attack the odds, and, you feel bad for the ones that died. Well, in 1969, they decided to make Guns of the Magnificent Seven. Well, Brynner was not going to reprise the role of Chris Adams. So George Kennedy stepped into this part, and this was basically breaking a revolutionary out of prison. And the seven in this film were Monty Markham, James Whitmore, Rennie Santoni, who unfortunately, I just found out today, passed away, Bernie Casey in his first film role, and he was the only black member of any of the Sevens, Joe Don Baker, and Scott Thomas. And it's a rousing thing, and it's odd that basically this is the only one of the seven films that Chris's right-hand man gets killed in the action. Michael Ansara is the bad guy. I believe Fernando Rey is the revolutionary they're trying to break out, and Frank Silvera is this reluctant bandit who can't get off his ass to do anybody any good until somebody finally shoots him. So, again, you know, all these guys, you know, George Kennedy, Academy Award winner, James Whitmore, all these guys pretty much went on to, you know, superstardom, except Scott Thomas. He was like, he still did some things, but, you know, nothing that, you know, hoisted him into the limelight like the rest of them. Unfortunately, the fourth one was the only one that was shot in America, and it was probably the weakest entry into the series. This time, Lee Van Cleef played the Chris Adams role, and by this time, the Chris Adams character had morphed into a retired federal marshal. Now, Gary Busey popped up in a small role. Basically, they grab Chris Adams' wife during a bank robbery and take her captive, and she winds up dead. Chris goes after them and finds out that the Busey character joined this gang of Mexican bandits who basically treated town, raped all the women, killed all the men, and are coming back to rape the women again. So now he has to get involved in this stuff and has to get a whole new group together. So he goes to prison and basically offers a bunch of guys that he had put behind bars a chance to redeem themselves and, you know, save the women, you know, from this gang of outlaws. Well, this time the seven is Michael Callan, Lucas Q, William Lucking, Pedro Armendez Jr., Ed Lauder, and James B. Sinking. All capable actors, all who achieved some semblance of you know, fame and notoriety in other pictures, but again, never achieved the leading man status that the original group had done. I find it interesting that Lee Van Cleef was playing the Yul Brynner role when Yul Brynner was over in Italy shooting a film called Indigo Black, which was retitled Adios Sabata, which was basically Lee Van Cleef's character, Sabata. So they were both all at the same time. So Magnificent Seven also soldiered on as a TV series and a big budget remake a couple years ago, which basically put Denzel Washington in the lead role, but thankfully they didn't use the Chris Adams name because that film, you know, was a good popcorn film, good action movie, but it couldn't capture, you know, any of the original four films. Like I said, you know, Walter Mirisch, the producer, did the sequels because he felt, you know, people were familiar with, you know, the Magnificent Seven and the characters and would come out to see it. Like I said, unfortunately, the last one, the Magnificent Seven Ride, suffers from a lot of budget restrictions because one of the big climactic battles is happens off camera and you only see end results of what happened. So, Grindhouse films, you know, especially action films, owe a debt of gratitude for the Magnificent Seven because, like I said, that was the first ensemble cast where you got to know the characters, got to like the characters, and felt genuinely pissed off when some of them died. So that's my take on Magnificent Seven. And as a side, you know, with Steve McQueen, Sturgis's next film would be The Great Escape. And like I said, McQueen was problematic on The Magnificent Seven, but he also became problematic on The Great Escape because he was supposed to do a lot of motorcycle work himself, but when he saw the script, he was sort of not happy that he had not that much dialogue, so he sort of like acted up on the set, and basically Sturgis at one point decided, well, fuck him, we'll write him out, but his agent said, no, let's sit down, let's do some rewrites, we want to keep him in because at that point he was becoming a big box office draw. So that's the Steve McQueen end of it, and again, I can only ask you people out there to, you know, mask up, stay safe, you know, stay sick, but stay safe, and hopefully we're going to get through all this. But that's it for today, and we'll have more for you down the road. And so thank you for subscribing. Thank you for checking out the channel. And somebody said, well, you know, do you get anything from doing this? I said, not really. The satisfaction of doing something, you know, that keeps the genre alive. And, you know, if I sell a couple DVDs, sell a couple magazines or whatever, you know, by doing this, so be it. That's all I'm looking to do. So on that note, catch you on the flip side. Stay safe.